The conference room of Morgan and Pierce Investment felt especially cold that morning, though maybe it was just the icy stares from the executives gathered around the mahogany table. 20 men in expensive suits, all focused on the mere secretary who had dared to question their precious merger deal. My name is Emily Zhang, and for the past 5 years, I've been the executive assistant to CEO Robert Morgan. The perfect assistant, quiet, efficient, invisible, always taking notes, making coffee, scheduling meetings, never speaking unless spoken to. Until today. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Robert said, his voice dripping with condescension. You think the Harrison Root merger is a mistake? I met his gaze steadily. The financials don't add up, sir. Their reported growth doesn't match their market performance, and their subsidiary structure shows signs off. Enough? Robert's fist hit the table, making the water glasses rattle. Who do you think you are? You're here to take notes, not give financial advice. Know your place. Laughter rippled around the table. These men, with their Ivy League MBAs and family connections, found it hilarious that a secretary would understand complex financial structures. They didn't know that while I was serving coffee and scheduling their meetings, I was also watching, learning, and most importantly, buying. My apologies, sir, I said quietly, returning to my laptop. I'll stick to the minutes. Robert smoothed his tie, regaining his composure. Now, gentlemen, as I was saying, the Harrison merger represents a unique opportunity. I tuned out his sales pitch, instead watching the faces around the table. Most were amused by my humiliation, but a few showed flickers of doubt. They should be doubting. After all, I hadn't spent the last 5 years just filing papers. It had started innocently enough. 5 years ago, fresh out of college with a degree in finance from Stanford, I discovered that no investment firm would take a Chinese-American woman seriously as an analyst. But they would hire me as a secretary, so I adapted. While the executives attended their power lunches, I studied their investment strategies. While they played golf, I analyzed market trends. And while they dismissed me as part of the office furniture, I began buying shares in Morgan and Pierce through a series of holding companies. The Harrison Group's innovation pipeline is unmatched, Robert continued, reaching for his coffee. Perfectly prepared, 2 sugars, just how he liked it. Just one of the 1,000 little details I manage daily. Their tech division alone is worth the asking price. I made another note on my laptop, not about the meeting, but about the email I'd received this morning from my private investigator. The Harrison Group's innovation pipeline was about to face 3 major patent challenges. Their tech division's value would plummet within months. But Robert was too busy courting their CEO to notice the red flags. Emily, order lunch for everyone, Robert commanded. We'll be here a while hammering out the details. Of course, sir. I stood smoothing my simple black dress. The usual from Le Bernardin? He waved his hand dismissively, already turning back to the board members. I slipped out quietly, but not before hearing him add, at least she's good at something. In my small office, really more of a glorified cubicle, I made the lunch arrangements on autopilot while my mind worked on larger concerns. Monday's shareholder vote on the Harrison merger was approaching fast. Robert thought he had the votes locked up. He didn't know about the proxy agreements I quietly secured over the past year. My phone buzzed. A message from Diana Chen, my grandmother. Everything ready for Monday. I smiled, thinking of the lessons she taught me growing up. As one of the first female stockbrokers in Hong Kong, she learned early that being underestimated could be a powerful advantage. All set, I texted back. They still don't know. And they didn't. None of them had bothered to look closely at the holding companies gradually acquiring Morgan and Pierce stock. Why would they? The companies had proper Western names, respectable board members, all the right paperwork. No one suspected they were all controlled by the quiet secretary who brought their coffee. Emily, Robert's voice boomed from the conference room. Where's that lunch order? Coming, sir. I called back, slipping my phone away. Back to being invisible. For 2 more days at least. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation, while Robert played tennis at his country club. Confident in his merger plans, I met with my lawyers, reviewing every detail of Monday's revelation. The timing had to be perfect. Monday morning dawned clear and crisp. I arrived early, as usual, preparing the boardroom for the shareholder vote. Robert strode in at 8:30, barely glancing at me as I handed him his coffee. Big day, he said, more to himself than to me. Once this merger goes through, Morgan and Pierce will be the largest investment firm on the East Coast. Yes, sir, I murmured, arranging papers at each seat. Very exciting. Shareholders began arriving at 9 o'clock. Most were familiar faces, old money families, institutional investors, other executives. A few newcomers caught my attention. Representatives from the holding companies I controlled, taking their seats quietly. Emily, take the minutes, Robert commanded as the meeting began. I sat in my usual corner, laptop ready, watching the drama unfold. Robert presented the merger proposal confidently, certain of his victory. The vote will now commence, he announced. All in favor. Point of order, a voice called from the back. One of my representatives stood up. Before we vote, we need to address some concerns about the Harrison Group's financials. Robert frowned. Their financials have been thoroughly vetted. Not thoroughly enough, another representative interrupted. Our analysis shows significant discrepancies. I watched Robert's face redden as more concerns were raised. His perfect plan was unraveling. Then came the killing blow. Furthermore, my lead lawyer stood up. Shareholders representing 51% of Morgan and Pierce stock have already filed paperwork opposing the merger. The room erupted in chaos. Robert jumped to his feet. That's impossible. I've spoken to all the major shareholders. Not all of them, I said quietly, closing my laptop. The room fell silent as every head turned toward me. Robert's face went from red to white. What are you talking about? I stood up, smoothing my dress. The holding companies that control 51% of Morgan and Pierce shares, I own them. For a moment, you could hear a pin drop. Then Robert started laughing. You? A secretary? Don't be ridiculous. I nodded to my lawyer, who began distributing documents. Everything is properly documented. The SEC filings, the proxy agreements, the voting rights. While you were dismissing me as just a secretary, I was becoming the majority shareholder of your company. Robert snatched the papers, scanning them frantically. I saw the moment reality hit him, when he realized that the quiet secretary he belittled for 5 years now controlled his company. You can't. This isn't. He sputtered. Actually, I can, and it is. I walked to the head of the table. And now that we've established that, let's talk about the real problems with the Harrison merger, shall we? The next hour was a detailed presentation of everything wrong with the Harrison Group. The patent issues, the inflated valuations, the hidden liabilities. Everything I'd noticed while serving coffee and taking notes. This merger would have destroyed Morgan and Pierce's value within a year, I concluded. Fortunately, as majority shareholder, I'm voting against it. Robert slumped in his chair, defeated. But I wasn't finished. The merger was just the beginning. 5 years of being invisible, of being underestimated, had given me a unique perspective on everything wrong with Morgan and Pierce. And now I had the power to fix it. One more thing, I said, picking up another stack of documents. I'm calling for a vote on new board leadership, starting with the position of CEO. The news hit Wall Street like a tsunami. CCRE Terry, REVEALET as majority way share dear. BLTKS $1 billion MERGER, screamed the headlines. Business networks ran endless speculation about how a 28-year-old executive assistant had quietly gained control of one of New York's most prestigious investment firms. I watched the coverage from my grandmother's penthouse apartment, sipping jasmine tea while Diana Chen smiled knowingly, the same smile she'd worn years ago when she first suggested this strategy. They still don't understand, she said in Mandarin, pouring more tea. They're so busy asking how you bought the shares that they're not asking why. They'll figure it out soon enough, I replied, checking my phone. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Time to show everyone exactly what just a secretary could do. The Morgan and Pierce boardroom looked different from the other side of the table. Robert sat in a visitor's chair, his usual confidence shattered. The other board members avoided eye contact, probably remembering every dismissive comment they'd made over the years. Now that the Harrison merger has been rejected, I began, we need to address the real issues facing Morgan and Pierce. Starting with our investment strategy. I pulled up a presentation on the main screen, charts, analysis, projections. Everything I compiled while sitting quietly in the corner of hundreds of meetings. Our current approach to emerging markets is outdated. We're missing major opportunities in Asian tech while overexposing ourselves to unstable European ventures. Meanwhile, our internal efficiency metrics are abysmal. The board members shifted uncomfortably as I detailed their mistakes. They'd never noticed the secretary understanding every flaw in their strategy, every missed opportunity, every inefficient process. But most importantly, I continued, our company culture is toxic. We've been promoting based on connections rather than competence, ignoring talented analysts while advancing mediocre executives. Robert finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in and. I can and I will. I cut him off. Unless you prefer, I call for a full SEC audit of your personal trading activities over the past 5 years. I kept very detailed records of those unofficial trades you asked me to help process. He fell silent, face pale. The other board members looked nervous. They all had similar secrets, all carefully noted in my files. I'm not here for revenge, I assured them, though several looked skeptical. I'm here to transform Morgan & Pierce into what it should have been all along. An ethical, efficient, and profitable investment firm that succeeds through excellence, not exploitation. I laid out my plan. New investment strategies focusing on emerging technologies and sustainable industries. A complete overhaul of hiring and promotion practices. Partnerships with innovative startups that the old guard had ignored. And finally, I concluded, we need new leadership. I prepared a list of recommended changes to the board composition. The vote was quick. Faced with either adapting to change or having their own misconduct exposed, the board members chose survival. Robert resigned as CEO along with several other executives. I took the position of executive chairwoman, bringing in fresh talent for other leadership roles. The transformation of Morgan & Pierce began immediately. My first act was promoting Sarah Martinez from the research department, a brilliant analyst who'd been repeatedly passed over because she didn't fit the culture. Why did you wait 5 years? She asked me over coffee in my new office, Robert's old domain. You could have taken control sooner. I smiled, remembering all the meetings I'd sat through, all the patterns I'd observed. I needed to understand everything first, not just the finances, but the people, the processes, the problems. Being invisible made that possible. The financial media was fascinated by my story. The silent stakeholder they called me, running features about the secretary who'd outmaneuvered the Wall Street elite. I gave one interview to a young Chinese-American reporter from Bloomberg. Everyone's asking how you acquired the shares, she said, but I want to know why you chose to be a secretary in the first place. Because true power doesn't come from a title, I explained. It comes from understanding. I learned more as a secretary than I ever would have as a junior analyst. I saw how decisions were really made, how power was really exercised, and I saw what needed to change. The changes at Morgan & Pierce were dramatic. Within 6 months, our new investment strategy was showing results. Our Asian tech portfolio outperformed all projections. Our reformed hiring practices brought in diverse talent that transformed our capabilities. Robert tried to make a comeback at a rival firm, but his reputation was tainted. The story of how he'd underestimated his secretary had become a cautionary tale in corporate circles. He eventually retired to Florida, where he probably still wonders how he never saw it coming. 1 year after my revelation, I stood at the podium of the annual shareholders meeting. The room was packed, institutional investors, media, and employees all eager to hear from the woman who'd engineered one of Wall Street's most remarkable transformations. Morgan & Pierce's profits have increased 40% since our restructuring, I announced. Our employee satisfaction ratings have doubled. Our investment portfolio is more diverse and resilient than ever. But most importantly, we've proven that success doesn't require sacrificing ethics. In the audience, I spotted my grandmother, beaming with pride. Next to her sat Lisa, my old assistant, now our head of operations. I promoted her within weeks of taking control, recognizing in her the same quiet competence I cultivated. Some of you are still wondering how a secretary managed to acquire control of this company. I continued. The answer is simple. I paid attention. While others were talking, I was listening. While they were showing off, I was learning. And while they were underestimating me, I was building something better. The applause was thunderous, but the real satisfaction came later in the quiet of my office. On my desk sat a small plaque, my old executive assistant nameplate kept as a reminder. Next to it stood awards for most innovative investment strategy and best corporate culture transformation. Last week, I gave a guest lecture at Columbia Business School. A student asked if I regretted spending 5 years as a secretary when I could have been climbing the corporate ladder. Those 5 years were my corporate ladder, I told her, just not the one everyone else could see. Morgan and Pierce continues to evolve. We've become known for identifying overlooked opportunities in markets, in companies, and in people. Our analysts now come from diverse backgrounds, each bringing unique perspectives that our competitors miss. The old guard of Wall Street still doesn't quite understand how they were outmaneuvered by a secretary. They're still focused on the how rather than the why. They don't realize that their greatest vulnerability was their certainty, their absolute conviction that power only looks one way. I kept my grandmother's advice framed on my office wall. True power is invisible until it's unstoppable. Below it, I added my own lesson. Success doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing clearly. The company's culture has transformed completely. Now, everyone knows that the quiet person taking notes might be the smartest one in the room. Every voice is heard, every perspective valued. We've created something rare on Wall Street, a place where excellence matters more than appearances. Sometimes, late at night in my office, I look out over the Manhattan skyline and think about that old conference room where I served coffee and endured condescension. The company we've built since then isn't just more profitable, it's more human. Robert's old saying was power is about being heard. He never understood that real power is about listening, about watching, about understanding not just the numbers, but the people behind them. As for me, I still keep a notebook in every meeting. Old habits die hard. But now, when I write, it's not just taking minutes, it's plotting the future, because the best kind of revolution isn't the one that tears things down. It's the one that builds something better in its place. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one writing that future, one careful note at a time.